Money for President Trump's wall was a huge sticking point in budget negotiations. But with the government slated for a potential shutdown come Friday, is the president now backtracking? Then our powerful interview with a retired Newark cop who suffers from PTSD after a tour in Iraq. We also sat down with Academy Award-winning screenwriter John Ridley and discussed his new documentary about the LA riots. Hard to believe they were 25 years ago. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for spending part of your Tuesday night with us. Well, the wall, it is leading the news again today. President Trump promised the U.S. would build it and Mexico would pay for it. But he still tried to cram it into a budget deal when it was clear Mexico would not be forwarding us a check. And that, well, that has caused an impasse, and it was bringing us closer and closer to a government shutdown that would happen Friday night. But now it appears the president is backing off. Forget the 100-day milestone. The biggest challenge facing the president this week may be avoiding a government shutdown beginning midnight Friday. The main sticking point? Funding for his border wall. The White House calls it a top priority. Democrats say it's a non-starter.
Can you, from that podium, guarantee that there will not be a government shutdown?
I can't guarantee.
How close can you get to guarantee?
I think that the work that Director Mulvaney and others have made in these negotiations has been very positive. They feel very confident that won't happen.
So he won't insist that his priorities get funded on the border, the wall, increased security.
That's not what I said.
But now there are signs the president is willing to give in to avoid a shutdown. According to multiple sources, President Trump told a group of conservative journalists at a private White House reception that he's willing to put off funding for the border wall until later this fall. Democratic reaction to the president's reported comments was swift. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York saying in a statement that President Trump was taking the wall off the table in a move good for the country. Now the president responding to reports that he's flip-flopped when it comes to the wall with what else but a tweet. Don't let the fake media tell you that I've changed my position on the wall. It will get built and help stop drugs, human trafficking, etc. Let's bring in our panel now. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist and former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association, also an attorney in his own right. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Okay, Richard. Did the president do what we all call is new math, I guess, and added up votes and said, I got a problem here. If I'm insisting on this thing, which as early in the week is what he did, it's going to get funded or else whatever. Did he finally do the math and realize not just would Democrats not come along, but enough Republicans wouldn't go along, this thing wouldn't pass?
Right. Look, at the end of the day, it is the simple math. And does it have to be in the budget in order to avoid a government shutdown? The simple answer is no. Republicans control the House, they control the Senate. This is, make no mistake about it, the president's, one of the president's top priorities is to build a wall, but it doesn't have to be now. What the president wants to focus on is things like what he's going to talk about tomorrow, which is cutting taxes to businesses and the economy. That is most important.
And we'll get to that, Richard, but my point is, your point that, hey, he doesn't have to do it now, we're only 100 days into this administration, he'll find a way to do it. First, obviously, was a huge campaign pledge, and Mexico was going to pay for it and all the rest. Then he chose to bring it up again and insert it as a mandate to get the budget passed. My point was, again, this seems to be self-inflicted, unforced errors on the part of the White House. Why bring it up? Why remind everybody that Mexico is not paying for it? Why make it a condition that you're willing to shut the government down? And then all of a sudden, 24 hours later, flip-flop and pull it off the table. Forget about whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm asking you, where's the political logic in looking like the very politician you ran against as being a flip-flop?
What's the loss to him?
He looks like a phony.
The wall is important. You know what?
Well, if it's that important, why doesn't he stick to his guns?
I'm going to put it in the budget. I don't have to do that. But the wall is my priority.
But he chose to do it.
And if it didn't pass, guess what? I can bring it up next time. Much like health care. You got to remember, he's not losing any points among those who voted for him. People still support those in the Rust Belt. Those people who voted for him still support him.
He's at historically bad numbers, Andrew. Yes, he's right. 96% still say they'll vote with him, but how did this help him?
You know who he's losing points with? Members of Congress.
Right.
We've already heard from the president's own mouth that you cannot believe anything that he says. because what he says holds no value. He'll contradict himself or reverse himself the next day. In the past week, we've now had 2 examples of complete threats that the president has made. One aimed at North Korea, one aimed at Congress. And they have both been blank threats. There's no force behind them. He threatened North Korea with sending our armada there, which we wound up sending 3,000 miles away. And it's now been exposed for every world leader to see that this president's threats don't mean anything. Now he's threatened Congress with the possibility of not passing a budget and having the government shut down if he doesn't get funding for his wall. That was the threat that he had made. Didn't look like it was going to happen, so he pulled it, and he pulled the threat. How many more threats would anybody on Capitol Hill take seriously from this president if he's not going to actually follow through on anything that he says or anything that he threatens?
Look, I think
that's the harm.
I think at the end of the day, what's important is that these are negotiating tools, and as the president admitted, there is a learning curve in terms of the presidency and understanding how it operates and what you can do.
I thought he was the best negotiator in the history of negotiation.
Well, it does certainly take time
Part
for
of the deal,
negotiations.
my friend. But Richard, my point's different. I'm saying if you don't have the votes, forget if it's good policy, bad policy, etc. There's a general rule of thumb, not just in Washington, but in every state house in this country, and even on county levels, for crying out loud. You count the votes before you have the vote. And if you don't have them, you don't threaten to have the vote because then you're exposed. He's done this to himself a couple times already. Why go through this charade if you don't have the math? That's my only point.
Look,
he reminded everybody that he didn't get Mexico to pay for the wall, and he reminded everybody that his own party doesn't want the wall now, or not enough that they want to pay with taxpayer dollars for it. It didn't make him look stronger.
Look, there is a negotiation that takes place among the president and Congress, and you put stuff out there to see whether or not it's going to happen or not. I mean, there was nothing,
but you don't
nothing
threaten
wrong with what he. Tactically, I understand you want to count the votes, and perhaps it shouldn't be. I don't know if the point is you're saying that it shouldn't come out publicly, but it reinforces.
Why did he insert it in the budget in the first place? Why did he make it part of the?
That is his priority.
No, because he didn't have the leverage to get it through any other way. Because
matter
there are
that
enough.
Every president does the same thing.
No Democrat.
Every president submits a
no
budget.
Democrat is going to vote for this, and very few Republicans want to vote for it.
You don't need the Democrats.
So, right, but he didn't have enough Republican votes, so he put it into this whole thing that would shut the government down because it was the only leverage he had to actually get it passed.
Okay, so Dom,
now, none.
Dom, we've seen enough now in 100 days that there's legitimate questions about how this administration's run, the relationship they have with Congress, Paul Ryan, whoever you want to say, which is the end result is isn't as important as just making a threat, okay, to Andrew's point. Second thing is they think they've got the votes, they put it in, then they find out after the fact they don't have the votes, so they have to pull it back before the embarrassment gets too big. Or they don't go through processes like everyone else on this planet. They decide whatever they want, and then they figure out after the fact what's going to happen if it actually comes up for a vote. Now, at least he didn't wait till Thursday at midnight to finally, pull this off the table. But which one is it? Do they just not know? Do they not want to learn? Are they the worst kids at math on the planet? Because this thing wasn't close to passing. I don't know what they gained for the last 24 hours because every newscast and every public affairs show is leading with the threat for the wall has been pulled off the table. President's bluff was called.
Richard, this was a very bad trial balloon. That's what these two are debating right now. Richard is correct. It is the president's right to do so. But Andrew was correct, and you're correct in terms of you at least you do the math. You don't jump out the window until you have the votes, or at least you're close to the votes so you can push your way to the end of the game.
Or you call them and make them have a vote on it, and then you find out which ones are with you and against you, and then you have them on record.
So what we're seeing here is an inexperience at the highest level of our government, where we have a new administration, where he's made all of these promises, and in the world of business, Donald Trump has been able to succeed greatly at threats, at being boisterous, of making these promises. That doesn't work in government. You have lawmakers, as you well know, at a local level, have to go back home with this stuff, and it won't fly. And so he jumps out the window. We're going to start at 1,000 instead of, being reasonable with expectation. No one has taught him the game of expectations. No one has taught him the game of politics. Many of his supporters will tell you that's a good thing. that he didn't come in as a politician. But he's exposing himself as very,
And he had to
very
surround himself.
ineffective
The
and
biggest
weak.
tool that he has, these threats. It's the one club in his bag he plays more than
But it's got
any
followed
other.
through on him.
Right,
once in a
and
while.
he has, and even on healthcare. Remember, he set a deadline for the healthcare. We're going to have a vote on Friday. Nope.
Let me tell you, tactically understanding he may want to save face among Republicans because he may not have had Republicans wanting to go on record voting against the wall and then going back to their districts
Then
saying,
why put it in the budget?
well, why not? Because it's his right. What does he have
But
to
he
lose?
looks weak. Here's his whole thing, Richard.
He's not weak. He's the president of the United
I
States.
think he came across with both healthcare and now this as, like Dominic said, I'm coming in as the guy who's the non-politician. I will shake things up, but you know what I am? I'm a deal closer. I'm the best negotiator there's ever been. You're going to be so tired of winning, Richard, in the first 100 days, you're going to beg me to stop winning. 100 days in, there ain't a whole lot of winning going on, and more than that, he can't close the deal. He is being shown that there is more vulnerabilities than I think even his supporters want to acknowledge here, where he doesn't know what he's doing.
I don't think it's not he doesn't know what he's doing. Look, every administration has its growing pains. This administration obviously is going to take more than 100 days to get things done, and that's what he's learning. He's
It
admitted
only
that.
gets harder from here, my friend. All right, all week we will be looking at Trump's first 100 days, and we'd like to hear from you at home. This is what we're going to do here. We're going to ask you to email us at rfl@rnntv.com, and we're going to read the comments on the air. So what I want to know is, how do you think the president's doing? Where do you think he succeeded? Where do you think he's failed? Are you worried? Are you optimistic about where we go from here? Let us know what you have to say. You see the email address right there at the bottom of the screen. Appreciate the contribution. All right, coming up next, a retired Newark police officer and Iraq war vet tells Dom about his struggles with PTSD and how he got the help he so desperately needed.